You give me the sign. What? Here we go. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Before we start our meeting tonight, we're going to have a swearing-in ceremony of a new city council person. So our city manager, pro tem, Alyssa, is going to swear Brian Quigley in as a new council member. So go ahead on it. Stand up. Stand up.
All right.
Should we stand
No, you guys
up?
are good.
Oh, okay. Well,
I, Brian Quigley,
I, Brian Quigley,
swear to support
swear to support
and uphold the Constitution
and uphold the Constitution
and laws of the United States
and laws of the United States
of America,
of America,
the state of Oregon,
the state of Oregon,
Stayton City Charter,
state and city charter,
and general ordinances
and general ordinances
of the city of Stayton,
of the city of Stayton,
and to faithfully perform
and to faithfully perform
the duties of the office
the duties of the office
of city councilor
of city councilor
for the city of Stayton.
for the city of Stayton.
So help me God.
So help me God. Thank
You're
you.
official.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks.
and welcome again.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Alyssa, are we live?
We sure are.
We're ready, okay.
Yep.
Let's see, what am I doing here? Keep asking myself that. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, friends and neighbors. This is a meeting of the Stayton City Council for January 3rd in the year of our Lord 2022. And we have kind of started, we're going to start with a flag salute. So let's do that. Would you join me, please? I pledge allegiance
To the flag
of the
United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Oh, let's see, announcements, additions to the agenda, are there any? I always look over at Alyssa to see if there's anything, okay. Declarations of ex parte contact, conflicts of interest, BIA, et cetera, anything?
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
In regards to the first item on the agenda, you know that I submitted testimony prior to being in this position. My testimony at the time was in regard to the process that took place up to this point. I don't believe that's going to affect my ability to decipher and be objective in reviewing the topic tonight.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, this is Counselor
Yes.
Patty. I did drive down to Sunrise, the court down there near the property in question. Outside of that, it won't impact my judgment.
Would you do the last part of that again, please?
Oh, I said outside of that, it won't impact my judgment.
Oh, okay.
Mr. Mayor?
Okay, I missed something there. Like, did you own a house down there?
No, I went down.
You went down there? Oh, okay. I'm fine. Good. Anyone else?
Yes, Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
right here. Hi.
Councilor Cook.
Yes, thank you. I received a message through social media, from a resident who has already testified previously. I read about a sentence in, and then I responded that they should submit public testimony because I realized what the topic was, and I let them know that it was still open. And so I don't actually know what the message fully said, but I did want to say that I did receive it.
Okay, thank you. We're up to appointments.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes. Oh, another one. Okay.
I have to declare a possible conflict or a potential conflict of interest, as I'm a real estate agent in the area, but I am not directly tied to this property, and so I will not be negatively or positively affected directly. And that's what the law states, is that I would have to recuse myself in that instance, but because I'm not directly involved, and this will not impact me in any way, I can still make good choices in this matter. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? No? Okay, appointments. First meeting of the year, we're supposed to appoint a council president. We can do it, Alyssa looked around to see how other cities do that and didn't get much in the way of feedback. It was just a kind of perfunctory council appointment that doesn't apparently need a lot of lobbying or fuss and feathers. So however you folks want to do it,
Mr. Mayor?
we can simply pass it around. We can keep it the way it is, whatever you want to do. I'm fine with it. This is my last year, and that's just good, just the way things should be. So, Council President, who wants the job?
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah,
I'd like to motion to appoint Counselor Patty as our council president for 2022.
Councilor Patty's been offered.
Second that motion?
Is there a second?
Yes, I second.
Councilor McDonald seconds. Are there any other nominations? Anyone else? Councilor Patty, you're being squeezed into a corner. Are you feeling the
I'm feeling
squeeze?
it. I'm feeling the squeeze, but very appreciative of both of you, the confidence that that nomination holds. So thank
If
you
there
for-
are no other nominations, I'd call for just a voice vote of the council to affirm that nomination. All in favor?
Yes.
Aye.
Yes.
Opposed, same sign? Good, no one's got the nerve to do
I'm going to
that to us.
abstain on that.
You're
Thank
it.
you. Yeah, there I am. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. And let's see, what's next? What's next? There's a couple more appointments on, that I'll need the council's affirmation on. A planning commission appointment of Larry McKinley, retired ODOT person, and a reappointment to Parks and Recreation from Andrew Westland. And you've seen the applications in your packet. Any comments on either of those? And
Mr. Mayor.
if those are okay, could I get some action on those, please?
Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to thank them for applying and being willing to serve the city because it's sometimes hard to fill the position. So thank you.
Same. Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the appointments of Larry McKinley to the Planning Commission and the reappointment of Andrew Westland to the Parks Board.
Okay. Got a motion, is there a second, please?
I'll second.
Okay. Motion and a second to appoint these two gentlemen, Larry McKinley to Planning Commission and Andrew Westland to Parks Board. Is there any discussion? If not, Alyssa, would you poll the council, please?
Sure. Counselor Patty?
Yes.
Counselor Ort?
Yes.
Counselor Quigley?
Yes.
Got to get used to it. Counselor Hook?
Yes.
And Counselor McDonald.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Okay. Is there any public comment at this time? On, I guess, on anything we've done?
And Mayor Porter, I didn't receive any request for public comment at this time, but I did have one for during the public hearing.
Okay. Is that going to work its way over here?
It is.
There'll
Now
be
that
one-
I realized it's still sitting over here.
The way these things have seemed to go, they come in through the public hearings. and
Yes.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, consent agenda for December 6th, a work session. Thank you. And December 6th, city council meeting minutes. So everyone's, I hope, had a chance to look through those. And could we get some action on that, please?
Mr. Mayor, this is Counselor Patty.
Yeah.
I move that we
Yes.
accept the consent agenda as presented, please.
Okay. A motion to approve the consent agenda as presented. Is there a second?
A second. Second.
Second, thank you. All right, everyone's comfortable with that. Would you poll the council again, please? Alyssa?
Sure. Counselor McDonald?
Yes.
Counselor Hook?
Yes.
Counselor Quigley?
I'm going to abstain.
Okay. Counselor Ort?
Yes.
Counselor Patty?
Yes.
Motion passes 4-0 with one abstention.
Okay. So we're at the, a lot of the business of this evening, a public hearing. And it's a continuation for an annexation application from Gene Jones, 13601 Fern Ridge Road. And if you've been here any time in the last 20 years, you know I have to read this. Holy cow. Do I have to read the whole thing? Okay, bear with me, folks. Here we go. Good evening. My name's Henry Porter. I'm the mayor of Stayton and will be presiding over this hearing. This is the time and place set for a continuance of the City Council's public hearing in the matter of Land Use File 11-07/19, application for annexation of approximately 19 acres of land at 13601 Fern Ridge Road into the city limits. The applicant has now requested that the property be zoned medium-density residential. This public hearing was commenced on March 2nd, 2020, and continued to allow the applicant to submit a conceptual plan of a multifamily development. The continuance was delayed due to the ongoing coronavirus pandemic and the city's desire to assure that the hearing would be held in a safe manner. A continued hearing was held on October 11th of October 11th, period. Following that hearing, the City Council deliberated and approved the first consideration of an ordinance to annex the property and assign medium-density residential zoning to the property. On October 18th, the City Council took up a second consideration of the ordinance, and rather than taking action on the ordinance, scheduled a new public hearing December 6th. This is all 2021. At that time, the City Council continued the hearing until this evening and directed the applicant to submit a revised conceptual plan. The purpose of tonight's public hearing is to review the updated conceptual plan of development for the property that was submitted on December 23rd of 2021. The hearing is now open. Oregon land use law requires a statement be made to those in attendance that covers certain matters relative to this case. That statement is available at the table at the entrance of the hearing room. If anyone objects to the statement not being read fully, please state your concern when it's your turn to speak. Annexation applications are required to satisfy approval criteria contained within the State Municipal Code number 17.12.210.4, approval criteria, and 17.12.180.6, criteria for approval of zoning map amendments. All testimony, arguments, and evidence received during this public hearing must be directed toward those approval criteria or to such other rule, law, regulation, or policy that you believe to apply to this case. If you have documents, maps, or letters that you wish to have considered by this body, they must formally be placed in the record of this proceeding. To do that, either before or after you speak, please submit them electronically to the planning staff. An issue which may be the basis for an appeal to LUBA must be raised not later than the close of the record or at or following the final evidentiary hearing on this case. Such issues shall be raised with sufficient specificity so as to afford this body and the parties to this hearing an adequate opportunity to respond to each issue. Prior to the conclusion of this hearing, any participant may request an opportunity to present additional evidence, arguments, or testimony regarding the application involved here. Continuances may take the form of holding an additional public hearing with oral testimony allowed, or may consist of holding the evidentiary record open for a period of time designated by the city for submittal of written evidence. Also at the table at the entrance to the hearing room is the agenda for this evening's meeting, which lays out the order in which people may be called on to speak during the public hearing, the City Council's rules of procedure for land use public hearings, and a brochure written to facilitate your participation in the public hearing. You're encouraged to obtain and read a copy of this document. At this time, I would ask the audience if there are any objections to the notice that was provided in this case. I hear none. To the jurisdiction of this body to hear and consider this case. I hear none. Are there any declarations of conflict of interest, ex parte contact, or bias by any members of the council?
Whereas there were several declarations of bias, potential conflicts of interest,
Those were already
and
noted.
ex parte communication, I'd just like to suggest that they should be noted here, that they were made and appear earlier in the minutes, so
Okay.
that they are on the record as part of this public hearing and not the general meeting. And in the future, the council should keep that in mind, so you only say them once.
Yeah, okay, we are now ready for the staff introduction. Whew. Mr. Fleischman. I have to do this again later.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, members of the public. We are here tonight for the, I believe, fourth proceeding in this case before this body, which was preceded by two public hearings before the Planning Commission back in 2019. I will repeat some of what I have said at the previous meetings. Again, you have before you an application for annexation into the city. There is not a concurrent application to develop the property. There is not detail on the engineering and the public improvements, all of that would come with an application for development, because there is no application for development. The issues before you tonight are only the issues surrounding annexation of the property and the criteria for approval for annexation. You continued the hearing on December 6th, requesting a new conceptual plan be submitted. One was submitted on December 23rd. When I come back with my staff report, I will discuss it in a bit more detail, as well as our recommendations. You also requested that staff, that I send out another request for comments, because the original, to our reviewing agencies and departments, because the original that was sent out was done back in 2019, when there was an accompanying application for a comprehensive plan amendment and the applicant's intention to do a commercial development of an RV park instead of a residential development. You've got in your packet the replies that were received from that second solicitation of review comments. So with that, I'll just wrap it up for now, and I will be back after the applicant's presentation to go through my staff report.
Okay, thank you. On the applicant presentation,
Mark?
Mark, is that
Yep.
green button, green line on?
All right.
Hey, there we go. Mark?
Now you can hear me. Huh? All right. Again, my name is Mark Grenz, and I'm with Multitech Engineering. Our office is at 1155 13th Street Southeast in Salem, and we're representing Mr. Jones in this application before you. As Dan outlined, it's clear to all of you why I'm here again. we've prepared an additional conceptual plan for this site for your to review as to how we believe that this site could be developed. I would hope the council and the community recognizes that my client did listen, and that we've attempted to provide you a plan that we believe is more in keeping with the comments that were made and what we believe the community is trying to look for here. Now, I know that there was some information provided in the packet that came in still with an objection to this over the density that's proposed here, but I think that given the fact that as we've outlined to you before, there needs to be a certain number of units that's achieved on this site in order to make it economically feasible under today's world, given the amount of property that we have to give up along the waterway and some other things to do. With the fact that there's wetlands on this site, as Dan has told you in the past, that affords us the requirement to have to follow the master plan process that you have for this. And so this plan was set out in reviewing the criteria that's in your master plan standards for this. As you can see from this plan, that for lots that are proposed to have single-family detached units that access them, that those roadways are set up to be in accordance with your standard public works requirements for roadway and improvement widths. There is one section inside here where we have a smaller right-of-way and smaller street proposed in it, where we have lots that are attached or duplex, triplex that front on them, and that again is consistent with what your master plan sets out. But because it's a master plan, there aren't any minimum lot widths or lot dimensions that need to be followed here, but so we set these up using a base width that would work for a single-family detached housing, similar to what we've done for projects around the valley that are similar to this in terms of what we're trying to do with densities. And we included, so there's 91 lots total on this site, of which, of the 91, there are 73 that are set up as single-family detached, which you had set out that I needed to have a minimum of 20%, and I'm significantly over that. We have, I believe that there's 20 duplex lots, 6 triplex lots, and 8 single-family attached units in here, so well below the 50% that you had asked that we be sure that we stay within. So, so I believe that to the extent that we were attempting to do what you wanted, we've gone beyond that and created a project that meets all that criteria. Staff had outlined it. They had a desire for housing along Fern Ridge to be lots and houses that were set up in such a way that the fronts could face out onto Fern Ridge and their access should come off of an internal street. That's how we've set that up so that can happen. With the lots that front along Fern Ridge, we did put some duplex lots on the corners in different places in order to try to take advantage of some of those areas where single-family detached might not be quite as desirable as others, as those busy intersections. And some of it was just by the fact that the way the lots that I had left worked out, that's how they set up. But I think it gives enough variety here so that we can attract the right kind of developer in the end. And my hopes are that this would be such that we could attract a developer builder to this as it goes forward. But I think it provides an opportunity for some good creativity in here and still maintains the open space and other things that we knew we had to do here. Again, I think that I've tried to keep this at least to achieve 100 units in here in some fashion in order to be able to make it economically feasible. We got a lot of crossings, a lot of waterways to cross here, and each of those crossings is expensive because they're they are going to be deemed jurisdictional waterways, and so, and likely since given the confluence of the waterways that we have here, they'll be considered fish bearing. So all of these crossings would have to be culverts. They're not going to be piped crossings. They'll have to be three-sided culverts or something, or small bridges, something like that to get across. So with that, there's a fair number of expensive crossings that have to be achieved to do that. And now we have public streets, or at least public natured streets. They may be private, but they'll be built to public standards. And so again, adding to the costs that are associated with this. So with that, I'd be happy to answer questions you might have of us tonight. So
Mark, if we could we get there's a picture show in Dan's report. Could we get that? And then we'll go to questions from the council and
you bet.
some back and forth there.
You betcha.
Okay?
Thank you.
Unless someone has a pressing question right now. This will move it along a little bit, but I'm kind of anxious to see those slides.
There we go. Oh, I need to do that? Yeah, all right, I've got to minimize that. I've got to go to Zoom. Share screen. What am I sharing? I'm sharing PowerPoint slideshow. Share. And then
We should have reconfigured the lights in
back
this
to the
place.
slideshow.
You can have
So hope, is that,
area,
that didn't do it?
I know it's not, the building isn't set up. There's something wrong with it. Because
Yeah,
it was
yeah.
church.
I don't want to open that window. Oh, the shared window is closed. Well, let's go to that one. Okay. Okay. That works? Still see it? Only, you don't see it when it's in the presentation mode. That's what happens. And let's then show, we'll just do it like that. I mean, if that's what we have to do, that's what we have to do. Okay, sorry for the delay there. So, I'm going to go through some of the same graphics that you had at the previous hearings. But again, we're here for the fourth round of this hearing. The first was back in March of 2020, again, October 11th, and then a month ago in early December. We're talking about 19 acres of land that is currently 2 tax parcels on Fern Ridge between the church and the Boulders Mobile Home Park. The property's got frontage on Fern Ridge Road. It is surrounded by city limits, or it's contiguous to the city limits on 3 sides. And the 4th side is State Highway 22. It does not have access onto Highway 22. Oh, I guess I got to do this now. The Land Use Code establishes 7 criteria for approval of an annexation. The 7th criteria deals only with contract annexations, which this is not, so there's really only 6 criteria that apply to this application. 4 of the 6, I think, are very objective criteria for which it's either clear that the application meets or doesn't meet. And 2 of them are more subjective and give the council some discretion as to how they are applied and whether you find that any application is complete, is compliant or not. Those 2 criteria are the first, that the need for the land exists in the community, and the 4th one, which is that about compatibility with the character of the surrounding area. My previous staff reports have all outlined my interpretation of the issue of need. The adopted comprehensive plan and the adopted housing needs analysis that is contained in it show that we do need to be annexing land and bringing more land into the city to accommodate the projected residential growth in those adopted documents. And I think it is really, I think that last month for the council, it really was the issue of compatibility with the character of the surrounding area. That it was the issue that I raised before you. It was the issue that a number of members of the public who offered testimony to you raised. And I believe it probably was on your mind when you asked the applicant to come back with a revised conceptual plan that included some single-family detached, because all of the surrounding property here is developed with single-family detached housing. The city's comprehensive plan designates the property as residential and indicates that in this area with the red cross hatching here, that there will be a natural resource overlay district along Lucas Ditch that will extend 100 feet either side of Lucas Ditch. Oh, come on, there we go. The current zoning for the property around to the east, the mobile home park is zoned medium density. To the south, across Fern Ridge is zoned low density. The church is zoned public, and to the west of that is zoned medium density residential zoning. As Mr. Grenz said, a new conceptual plan was submitted in December. It shows a total of 91 lots. In this is the plan that was submitted. The lots that have nothing shown on them are for single-family detached homes. And there are, what was the number, 73 of the 91 lots for single-family detached. These lots here on the south side of this interior road, I'm interpreting are for single-family attached, which the way our code defines that term, it's housing that is attached, but each unit is on their own individual lot. As if you were to, once this gets built, if you were to drive down the street, they would look like duplexes, but each side of the duplex is on their own individual lot. So it's defined differently in our code as single-family attached, because a duplex is defined as a two-unit building on a lot, as opposed to a two-unit building on two lots. Up on the north side of that road and that selected corner lots are duplexes, again, 2 units in a building on a single lot. And there are a total of 10 duplex buildings for 20 units. And there are 2 triplex buildings shown for a total of 6 units. Because as I've said before, but just to reinforce, so again, here's a summary of the proposed housing type mix in the shown on the sketch plan. As I've said before, because this property has significant wetlands identified in the city's local wetlands inventory, our code requires that when the property is developed, that it be developed as a master plan development. And what that means is that the lot size requirements that are typically associated with our various zoning districts, I don't want to say they're thrown out the window, but we ignore the minimum lot size requirements for individual lots. We calculate the total number of housing units that are permitted in the development, and we provide for freedom and flexibility to design a development to fit into the landscape that stays out of the wetlands. And we may get reduced lot sizes, but we regulate the maximum number of housing units that can be in the development. And we allow a mix of housing types as is shown in the conceptual plan. This property is about 19 acres in size. If the council chooses to zone it as medium density, we would calculate the maximum number of housing units permitted by taking the gross area of the property and dividing by 7,000 square feet. So 19.1 acres times 43,560 square feet per acre divided by 7,000 comes up with 118. And you've got a proposal, you've got a conceptual plan in front of you for 107. Certainly below the maximum that would be permitted with medium density zoning. So the recommendation from staff with this revised conceptual plan is to approve the application for annexation and to assign medium density zoning to the property with the natural resource overlay district applying within 100 feet either side of Lucas Ditch. That is the draft ordinance that you have before you, the revised and updated ordinance 1043. And I want to just take a moment to point out a couple of key sections of our code for your consideration. You probably can't read that screen from so far away. But section 1712 210.6, which is part of the annexation approval process and criteria states, as I have said before to you at the earlier hearings, states that the code allows this process where someone comes in, asks for property to be annexed without having a concurrent application for development. It says if you do that, however, you need to provide a conceptual plan of what you've got in mind, and then goes on to say that the development in the future, after the property is annexed, shall be in substantial conformance with the conceptual plan submitted with the application for annexation. And for the purposes of this section, for residential development, development is in substantial conformance with the conceptual plan if the number and types of housing units are generally consistent with those presented in the conceptual plan. So the applicant has now come in with a conceptual plan for 107 total dwellings with a mix of 73 single-family detached, 8 single-family attached, 20 duplex, and 6 triplex units. And the applicant will be held, not necessarily to those exact numbers, but generally consistent with that mix of housing types and generally consistent with the total that's in their conceptual plan. That is what our code requires. Secondly, as I just mentioned, Section 1724.090.2 is the section in the code that requires that a subdivision be processed using the provisions of the master plan development standards when a land division is to occur on a parcel containing significant wetlands. And so that's what, even though you may, medium density zoning allows single-family detached, duplexes and triplexes. So they are not proposing housing, in their conceptual plan, they're not proposing housing types that are not permitted in the medium density zone. It really comes down to what's the total number of units permitted, what are the individual lot sizes going to be, et cetera. With that's my recommendation for you. The staff report's got a number of options available to you with suggested motions for each one. The other thing I wanted to say, I guess, is you've got in your packet the responses that came from the requests for additional comments from other city agencies, from our outside reviewers, franchise utilities, the county, et cetera. The one comment that we received, the one reply that we received back that I did not include in the packet was from the Marion County Planning Division, who replied saying they have no comment. So it was, at least it was a reply, but it wasn't a reply worthy of putting in the in the packet because they had no comment. There are comments in here from Marion County Public Works, but they really address future development of the property, not the criteria for annexation or not their ability to provide service on Fern Ridge Road. You will note that they state, as they did in their comments back in the fall of 2019, that at the time that this property is developed and urban frontage, urban improvements are required on Fern Ridge Road, that the county would be looking for the city of Stayton to take over maintenance of this section of Fern Ridge Road, as was agreed to roughly 20 years ago when the Sylvan Springs development was put in to the west of here. So the city currently maintains Fern Ridge Road between Cascade Highway and the east end of the Sylvan Springs development. And then the county maintenance resumes at the church and all the way to the east. So with that, I will end and be available to answer any questions you may have.
Questions from the council, and you can address these to either one or Mr. Prince.
Mr. Mayor, may I start, please? Dan, in regards to the slide you have up there now, is there a sunset clause on either one of those? So if it's proved today, and for whatever reason, it doesn't take development for a number of years, let's just call it theoretically 5, 10, 15 years, at what point does the same criteria when it was passed still apply? Or does it expire at any point?
There is no sunset clause. I don't see that it expires. It would depend on city staff maintaining some institutional memory of that there is of what came in with the annexation.
Right, and I think we have a history of that.
Yeah.
And so if this property exchanged hands at this point in the future, the new owner could come to us and say, here's our new plan. And we would tell them,
We would tell them, we're sorry, your new plan needs to be substantially conforming
okay,
with the plan that was approved in 2022.
how would that, just another question, how would that be, I want to make sure we don't lose sight of that in the future.
I believe we've got the systems set up in the office
Okay.
to flag those things now. I mean, what we will do is have essentially a note in the city's geographic information system that attaches the conceptual plan to this property
Okay.
so that my successors, if it is 10 or 15 or 20 years, and I don't last exactly that long around here, will know that this conceptual plan is there in the files.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, go ahead.
that was going to,
Counselor.
just to follow up to what Counselor Cooley was saying, I was wondering if this, because it's not part of the, oh my gosh, the ordinance, but if this could be put in with it, this conceptual, at least in the file with it. It doesn't,
It
I'm
will
not saying
be-
it have to
it-
be
It,
in
it,
there.
it actually would, it may make sense. I hadn't thought of that. But to create Exhibit E on the ordinance and
Yeah.
include the sketch plan as Exhibit E.
I'll take that.
Two questions. Either, Dan, for you or Mr. Grenz. Is clustering the multifamily housing in kind of an island in the middle of single-family residential development, is that unusual? Is it common? Is it, where else might a person see something like this? I mean, I think it's interesting, rather than put it out on the edge near the highway where there's going to be more noise, that it's kind of a couple of islands there.
Yeah.
It's kind of neat.
I think that it is not unusual.
Okay.
While if you were to drive up Deer Ave, a little to the west of here, the Wildlife Meadows subdivision, just east of Stayton Middle School, while certainly the scale of that subdivision is substantially less than this, it is, when they were before the Planning Commission, they had, shall we say, a cluster of smaller lots. There's, I forget whether it's 5 or 6 lots that have only 40 feet of frontage, that when they were before the Planning Commission, they were talking about as being attached units. They ended up being detached, but on 40-foot lots. And also On the east side of Deer Ave, there were 4 lots that were designated at that time as duplex lots. It turns out that buyers of those lots chose to build 2 duplexes and 2 single-family homes because that subdivision wasn't a developer builder. He just put in the roads and sold lots, and then people, two of the purchasers of those designated duplex lots chose to just build single-family homes when they could have built a duplex. But there are 2 duplexes in there that are back-to-back. So I think that is kind of an example of how that was done in that development. And I'll leave it to Mr. Grenz if he wants to articulate any more on that.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, go ahead, Councilor.
So I have one housekeeping thing. You had said that there were 7 criteria. It's actually 6 criteria. You had split them out. You split D up into 2 different bullet points.
Okay.
Yeah. So just in case people had been watching this whole time and going, wait, what's the 7th one? It's just the bullet points were split up. Did any of our departments within the city of Stayton respond to?
I had phone conversations with the police chief and with the city engineer, but received nothing in writing from
Okay.
any. Oh, and I also had a brief phone conversation with the library director.
Okay. And there was no concerns?
And I received nothing in writing to be included in the record.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
I'll let someone else ask questions. I've got a couple more.
Somebody else? Questions?
Mr. Mayor, I have another one if no one else does.
Mr. Mayor, this is Councilor Petty. I actually had just a quick one, if I could get in there. Thank you, I appreciate it. Dan, earlier you had stated what the minimum density would be for an approved development here, and I can't quite remember what that number was of units that would be approved based on the medium density criteria. I believe you said it was 119 or 18, something like that, right?
The maximum
Maximum. Oh, okay, maximum.
of
Okay.
118,
I just wanted to clarify that.
based on 19.1 acres
Yeah.
times 43,560 square feet per acre divided by 7,000 square feet per lot in the medium density gets you 118.
Okay, good. Thank you. I just wanted to clarify what you were trying to state there. I got it now. Thank you.
Somebody else?
I have a missed question.
Go ahead.
Dan, you just brought up an interesting point. You were talking about the previous development, and individual had bought those lots. So as this moves along and individuals come in there and potentially buy these lots from an individual standpoint, then what happens? They can put whatever they want on that piece of property?
They can't put whatever they want, but if this plan were to essentially be approved as the subdivision, and I came along and bought one of the lots that is designated as a duplex lot
Right.
on this, I could build a single-family home. But if I bought one of the single-family designated lots, I could only build
Okay.
a single-family home.
Okay.
Dan, my second question, I just remembered it. Wonderful. Do you and maybe Mr. Grenz sense that this council wants to lock something in here? That we approve, okay, just tonight, the annexation. And we've got a conceptual plan, but then somebody senses wiggle room in this, and this conceptual thing gets moved around down the road. You sense what this council wants, you've heard the comments, that they want it locked in. If it's going to look like this, it should look like this. Because somebody may decide to try to put 150 apartments in there. And you and I have talked about this. How do we lock something in here? Can we reasonably lock it up?
We lock it up by this provision in section 1712 to 10.6 that says development shall be in substantial conformance with this substantial plan. And what that means is that the number and types of housing units are generally consistent.
Okay.
So in my mind, that doesn't mean that this is the layout that is required, because this layout has not been engineered. Or at least the engineering hasn't been submitted to the city. I don't want to doubt the skills and knowledge of Mr. Grenz and his team, but we haven't seen a preliminary stormwater report and a stormwater management plan. We haven't seen wetland delineations. We haven't seen a traffic impact analysis to discuss the location of entrances on Fern Ridge Road. Once those further studies are done, the internal layout of this subdivision very well could change. But the code says that we will be substantially in compliance with the total number of housing units and the mix of housing types. And in my mind, as you and I have discussed, Mr. Mayor, that means if they came in with a plan for 69 single-family detached instead of 71, I would say that's probably substantially compliant. But if they came in with a plan for 40, I would say no. If they came in with a plan that included multifamily housing, which our code defines as a building with 4 or more units, when this conceptual plan had no multifamily housing, I would say, no, you're not compliant with the conceptual plan. So there's room for shifting a couple here and there, but single family, roughly 70 plus or minus single family detached, roughly 8 plus or minus single family attached, roughly 20, give or take, duplexes, and 6 triplexes. That's what they've said they're going to build. If this is the plan that the council adopts because it finds it is compatible with the surrounding neighborhood, then that is the development scheme that will be imposed on this property when someone comes in for future development. Not necessarily this layout, because again, that may not work once they do the engineering. Maybe they've done more than they've shown us, but we haven't seen it.
Well, some of those reassurances, I think, are kind of what we're looking for, if we can get them.
I don't think there's a whole lot much more that can be done and have that mix of housing types.
Okay, all right.
Mr. Mayor?
Go ahead. I'm not going to belabor that anymore for now. Go ahead, please.
Thank you so much. Dan, I'm not considering this portion in my decision because I know that we're going by the certain criteria, but I'm curious because of some of the other issues that we've had in the past with what I think I heard you say, there were some narrower streets, like maybe some streets that were more narrow in here, and I'm looking at this. We've had other developments that have had issues with parking and things like that in the past. And I'm seeing this street with these multifamily housing, or not multifamily, but the duplexes and triplexes, that it looks a lot more narrow there. like maybe there won't be enough parking in that area. So although I'm not taking that into consideration when making that decision, I want to also make sure that the developer understands that if this is approved and this is the plan and that is narrow where there's only going to be one side of the street parking or no parking on that, that there have been issues in the past with those types of plans getting either approved or they come back. So did you guys talk about that? Like, is that a more narrow street? I'm just curious for information, what the parking situation looks like. And I do want to also thank the developer for really coming back with something a lot different. And it does look like they really did try to listen to what was being said. So I do want to acknowledge that. I'm just curious if they're aware of those previous issues that we've had here based on what they have put forward.
The issues that we've had in this city are not issues of design. At the time those neighborhoods were approved by the city said there shall be no parking on one side of the street. The issues we had was at the time that they were built 20 whatever years ago, nobody bothered putting up no parking signs for 10 or 15 years after people were living there, parking on both sides of the street and creating problems. Our code does allow, in certain cases, street rights-of-way less than 60. It allows as narrow as a 50-foot street right-of-way, but says it shall be no parking on one side, and I believe that it even says it shall be one-way traffic. I'm not quite sure about that one. And I don't have my whole code book in front of me. But anyway, we will make sure that when an application is developed and submitted, it is in compliance with the city's design standards and specifications and is built correctly. And if part of that approval is that there are no parking signs, we will make sure there are no parking signs on one side of the street. I mean, that's the problem we've had in these other neighborhoods, is that city staff and inspectors weren't making sure that things were done as approved. Not that the design wasn't any good, not that the decision of the planning commission or the city council at the time was faulty, but it wasn't complied with.
Dan, I hope that you do understand that there is a lack of parking in those neighborhoods and that is an issue. So it does seem like a design issue, but I don't want to debate over that. I just wanted to put that out there for the developer to think of for when it does come across. And I am thankful that they brought forward this conceptual plan.
Mr. Mayor, one point of clarification, please. Dan, in regards to the two of the criteria that you mentioned, the need exist and the compatibility with the character, those two specific requirements, is that stemmed from the Senate bill from 2016, or is that our interpretation?
That is Stayton's code. It's been Stayton's code for decades.
Okay. And I think if you look at that Senate bill, it's very much similar, the two issues in there. As far as the compatibility piece goes, I believe.
Yeah, if you're referring to the bill that said we can't send this out to
Correct.
the voters,
1573.
it said if you find that our criteria in our code are met and the property is in the urban growth boundary and is contiguous to the city limits, then you may not send it to the voters for their approval.
Right. And I want to make sure that the community understands how that home rule piece for the council has been removed. removed in 2016, essentially.
Correct.
And then I had, on my previous tenure, I had two issues where the annexation piece came up and we had no choice.
The discretion.
Let me correct that. The
Okay.
choice in referring it to the vote.
Correct. You have no choice. State law prohibits the council from sending this to the voters. And state law has prohibited that for 5+ years, whenever
Right.
in 16 it went into effect.
Mr. Mayor, I just have one more clarification question. Thank you. Dan, is it true that I'm understanding correctly that we won't see a conceptual plan change that goes above 118 units?
You won't see let me look at the language in the code. You won't see a development plan that is not generally consistent with, you will not, the planning commission will not be able to approve a plan with more than 118 units.
Great. It would have to come to the council then?
No,
No.
you would not be able to approve a plan.
Great, so 118 is the cap.
118 is the max for
Thank you.
this type of development permitted under medium-density zoning.
Thank you, that's very helpful, thank you.
Okay. More reassurances, yeah. Other questions, thoughts? If not, let's,
And if they came in with a plan for 118, then the planning commission would need to decide whether that is generally consistent or not with the 105 or 107 that are in the conceptual plan. And again, if they said 107 and came in with 108, I would go, that's generally consistent. If they came in with 140, I would say no. But where that, what number crosses that threshold, I can't tell you right now, and that's why there's 5 members of the planning commission to make that decision.
Mr. Mayor.
yes, Counselor.
Dan, a clarifying question for that. So can you, because this conceptual drawing has 107 units, but the one that we saw previously had over 200. Where's the difference there? Because there were
Oh,
like a
oh.
couple apartment buildings. Is that why? Because you're.
So yeah. It's because the previous plan, the previous conceptual plan that was submitted was not a subdivision. It was going to be one parcel of land
Okay.
developed with however many buildings that was, with a total of 230, I think, 8 units. And the difference is that the way our code is written, for the medium density zone, it says the minimum lot size requirement for creating a new lot is 7,000 square feet with 70 feet of frontage. And then it goes on to say, with a maximum density of 12 units per acre. So if someone came in with a 19.1 acre parcel and wanted to keep it a whole parcel, they could have up to 12 units per acre, or 19.1 times 12, which I calculate to be 228 units.
Okay, I get you now.
But if they want to do a subdivision,
Now they're parceling out.
they're parceling it out, and we take 19.1, divide it by 43,560, and then, or
gotcha.
multiply it, then divide by 7,000, and you come up with 118.
Okay. Thank you.
And that's a peculiarity of our existing code. So on one hand, it says you can have 12 units per acre, but if you're going to do even if you're going to do a subdivision and even have duplexes on each of those 7,000 square foot lots, you only come up with 9.6 units per acre.
Any other questions at this point? Go ahead.
Dan, what's the current population projection for Stayton? One percent?
I can answer the question of what is the current projection for population growth.
Okay.
Growth rate, and that's about 0.9% average annual growth over the next 30 years.
Right.
What I don't have in my head is what the projected population in 2049 or whatever 30 years is from now
Sure.
is, but it's based on about 0.9%.
And how many projects are pending right now or have been approved already prior to development? How many annexations have been approved, or how many plats, or whatever you want to call it? I
There,
think Councilor Hook brought it up last meeting.
right. There are approved by the Planning Commission, but not yet platted. There is the 4-parcel subdivision next to your house, which if they don't start construction on that soon, the Planning Commission approval will expire. There is a site plan approval for a duplex development on East Santiam Street at the old Pacific Coast Electric property. That is nine duplexes for 18 units. And there is the 100-unit apartment complex that the Planning Commission approved in either September or October. No, it was just the November meeting. On Golf Club Road near the intersection of Schaff.
Okay.
Those are the only, so those are the 3 recent
Okay.
developments that have been approved and nothing started for construction yet. There's Lambert Place subdivision. There is 1 lot for which building permit has not been issued. That application was submitted today. And there is, in theory, the possibility of a 3rd phase of Phillips Estates, and there's the 26 vacant lots in Phillips Estates for which the city will not be issuing building permits until a developer can come up with a workable, legal stormwater plan and facility.
Okay. And what about the property next to Maps Credit Union?
That property is under contract by a developer who has received some state financing, but they have not even submitted an application yet.
Okay.
They've had a pre-application meeting.
Okay.
And that will be about 72, 76. Again, they haven't submitted an application, so I don't know exactly what the number is.
But we've grown in the last 20 or 30 years about 80 people a year, 70 to 80. About 1%, isn't it?
The last 20 years, probably about that many.
Other questions for Dan at this point? How about, let's go to proponent's testimony.
I want to make sure that,
All right,
that
if
there were
there's-
some questions that were posed to both me and Mr. Grenz. I want to make sure that
Right.
Mr. Grenz has the opportunity to answer them.
Thank you. If I can remember, probably one of the things that you should understand about this plan is in every one of these plans that I've brought forward to you based on the type of development we're proposing, they were all plans that I felt, that I felt confident that I could develop them fairly consistently with what I put together. And the same would be true here. So things that I don't know that could impact this final plan is when we would bring it back to the planning commission would be if for some reason there would be significantly more wetlands determined to be on the site than our preliminary evaluation says, then we would lose land and we would have to make some adjustment for that in some fashion. We've done enough evaluation to make sure that we believe we have enough open space and enough area to do stormwater quality and quantity development to meet your current standards that exist. So I'm pretty comfortable with those things, and I don't think there's going to be anything that comes out of a TIA that's going to change the way I have this set up, because 10th is going to be where 10th is. And then I have a secondary access back out to Fern, and all that is intended to be an emergency secondary access. So it's not, so that shouldn't have any negative impacts from a TIA on that. So I believe that you have a pretty good set of assurances that this thing is going to have to come back very similar to what you see here. Dan was good for you to note, there is no multifamily proposed in this. I purposely stayed away from anything greater than a triplex so that I was not proposing multifamily, because that seemed to be a very sensitive subject to your neighborhood there. So anyway, if I didn't answer a question, please put it forth to me, and then I know I still likely will have one more opportunity to summarize. But
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Again, this is not going into my actual decision. I just have I'm just curious. If you were to go to the planning commission and there was, people coming forward saying, oh, those streets are too narrow, would you just take like one or two of those single family lots and turn them into like a duplex or a triplex? I really do appreciate the difference that you had in this. I mean, you were asked to do a minimum of 20% of the dwellings as single family, and you did 68% of them as single family. So that was a huge effort, I think, for you guys to really listen to the community. So thank you for that. But I'm just curious, if that conversation happened, what would that look like, do you think?
the only street that's not, there's only two sections of streets in here that aren't 60-foot right-of-way. One is the cul-de-sac on the end, which that comes off, and by code, that's allowed to be 50. So that's the case there. And then the other one is the street that goes alongside the single-family attached and the duplex, triplex lots. And again, that was by design, because the way your master plan and your public works standards state that if a single-family detached lot takes access from a road, it has to be a 60-foot right-of-way or a 50. So inversely, I concluded that since I had no single-family detached units attached to that street, that I would be able to propose a design that allowed me to go to a narrow street. You have in your public works standards what's called a skinny street or a narrower street that's allowed. Now, it's not outright allowed, but it's allowed to request it from public works. So that's why I did that. I have enough space in there to probably make, if that were to not be approved, I have enough space to make some adjustments to make it at least a 50, I think it's a 45-foot right-of-way with 5-foot sidewalks and a 30, so that'd be 35. So it's about a 32-foot wide street. So it's not that much different than a standard street. But that's the logic I used in getting there for this concept. Recognize it's still just a concept. I still got to come back. It's got to be approved again, there's a much more level of work that goes into the next round. when it comes back to the planning commission through your master plan and your detailed plan approval process. So there's still a few little places I could stumble here, but I'm pretty comfortable that it's doable. I actually got a master plan project approved in town here that never got built, and that was the old mill, at the old woolen mill. So I did go through that process all the way to the end, and then never actually built it, but I did get it all approved, so I at least know I can do it. At
Yeah,
least what
thank you
takes
for
to-
entertaining that question. I appreciate it. And again, it doesn't affect, my decision on the criteria being met or not. I was just very curious
Yep.
about
And
it, so thank you.
Parking, I know parking is always sensitive, and I think that, at least in the units that I've envisioned putting on here for the duplexes, triplex, would all have garages, so they would all have. So you're talking about 2 parking spaces. It's possible someone might view it different than, but that's what we have set up here, is they had garages, so they would have 2 parking spaces per unit at a minimum, plus whatever's available on the street around that. So I don't think it's, given the fact that it's pretty much all single-family now, or single-family related, that's different than multifamily, where you start putting a lot of multifamily together, and where there aren't garages in it, it gets a little harder.
Okay. Other questions for Mark?
Mr. Mayor, one last question for me.
All right, go ahead.
Can you elaborate on the private bridges for us real quick? I think you mean that as far as building them, correct? You guys would infer the cost to build those.
Yes.
And then what about in the future, so those bridges have an issue, whether it be flooding, construction from a standpoint of integrity of the bridge, who's going to take care of that?
Well, I don't think I have to leap very far to know that your Public Works Department is going to make sure that all of those, that when those things are built, they're sized in order to handle the appropriate flow. You got Lance and then you got Mr. Ashley, are 2 pretty thorough people that I've dealt with here before. So I'm pretty comfortable that I'm not going to get there without having to make a pretty good substantial proof. But everything would be designed in order to take into account the capacities that's needed here, and there would be a study done on Lucas Ditch that would establish what a theoretical floodplain would need to be and a floodway would need to be, even though this may not be, I don't think this is regulated by FEMA, but in any event, that would be a process that we've had to do before in your town, and we would probably have to do that again in order to be able to establish it. And then everything would be built to be above what would be the theoretical base flood elevation established from that. And then we'd have to make sure that whatever we did here didn't negatively impact somebody upstream as well, so.
Okay.
They're pretty thorough guys, so I'm not too worried about that part of it. They've run me through the ringer pretty good before, so.
All right,
Mr. Mayor?
yes.
Okay, so clarification on that though, but so after they're built, then who is responsible for them?
Well, the likelihood there's going to be some kind of a homeowner association created with this because of the open space. So there'd be an entity that's responsible for maintaining those facilities and making sure they work. If we plat right of way, and I think it's still debatable as to whether the right of ways in here end up being public or private, because the master plan affords both options. But if we create right of way and those structures are built in public right of way, then the city would be the ones that ultimately has to make sure that the maintenance of those facilities are done right. But whether they're public or private, your Public Works Department is going to make sure that the standards and the criteria that need to be applied to them are applied, whether they're public or private.
Okay, thank you.
That it? Thank you, Mark, for now.
You bet.
And let's go to proponents' testimony. And so far, this is the only green slip I've got. Ms. Cole, would you tell me when in this process you want to make your comment? We've got proponents, opponents, and general testimony. There's all kinds of possibilities here.
Oh, I didn't check it on here. This is regarding the density development
Well,
there?
but
that
when-
Low, medium, or high,
Well-
plus
Time, where in this process would you like to make those comments?
wherever you're ready for me.
Well-
Now is good, now is good.
Well, we're going to go to proponents' testimony, people in favor of this proposal,
Okay.
and if that would work, fine. If there's no proponents' testimony, we'll go to opponents.
Okay.
And if none of those fit, down the road a ways, there's general testimony. So you let me or whoever's in the chair.
If everybody already has their mind made up what's going on, then she should talk now.
Well, under proponents or opponents?
Opponents.
Okay, let me ask, I gotta do this, in a linear thing here. Is there any proponents' testimony? Is there any opponents' testimony? Jan Cole,
Yes.
C, is that C-O-L-E?
COLL.
C-O, Call,
Call.
okay. Come on up to the platform
I
and,
would like to ask a quick question of one of these gentlemen. What is type H housing?
oh, wait, now, ma'am,
Oh, I'm sorry.
address the council and make sure your green light's on.
It is.
Okay,
Jan Rainey Call, 1529 Fern Ridge Road.
okay.
I have a question regarding this last conceptual plan that was turned in, and that is, what is H-type housing? Can someone answer that for me? On each little block, when he shows you the diagram of the housing, in the teeny tiny little print, it says H-type. What is H-type?
I certainly don't know. Well, I've been asking, where do you want to testify?
It just has to do a little bit with the comments that I have from neighbors of the Fern Ridge Road property.
Jan, is this under opponents, are you opposing this proposal or just some general comment?
This is going to be general comments because we don't oppose the annexation.
Okay.
This is going to be repetitive from some of it from previous testimony, but I have spoken with a lot of my neighbors, about 50 or 60 of them, to get opinions that I kind of feel obligated to direct to the council so that you're aware.
Okay. Could we wait then till?
Mr. Mayor, I believe I can answer Ms. Cole's question.
Okay, go ahead on it.
It refers to an architectural style of the building itself.
Okay, so it's not in reference to low-income housing like it says on the internet?
I have no idea what the internet says.
Okay,
Nothing has been discussed about the price,
Okay.
cost, or occupants. Nothing has been presented on the
Okay.
record
okay,
or off the record about
okay,
the income level that this housing might be developed for.
okay. That was a concern from some of the neighbors, so they'll be happy to hear that. I want to thank you for all of your help over the past couple weeks, Dan. Should I go ahead and read my statement? This embodies conversations with about 50 or 60 people that live on Fern Ridge Road and what their thoughts were. Now, some of this has been addressed. When he altered the conceptual plan, that changed some of it, but I'm still feel obligated to speak on it. How much of this is going to be rentals? I'm assuming that's just going to be the duplexes and triplexes. That's a huge concern. Everyone realizes that eventually this property will be annexed and developed. We have no objection to that annexation or development. For over 2 years, we've appeared before council to make our voices heard regarding this development. Again, this is not about development. I understand that. It's about the annexation. He's already addressed a little bit the increased traffic, the Lucas Ditch, the burden on the police and fire departments, as well as water and sewer infrastructures. This new plan is more along the lines of what we'd like to see. This is what the neighbors would like to see. Council has heard all of these concerns, but at one time voted for medium-density housing, so I'm hoping to try and change your mind on behalf of the neighbors on Fern Ridge. Not one person spoke in favor of medium-density housing, apartments, duplexes, triplexes, or low-income housing. Council has heard, but apparently at that time, when that vote was taking place, did not listen to the neighbors of this property. I hope you'll listen now. Focusing on what these people have said to me, the people who will be affected the most would like to see this inevitable development take place, but we'd like to see a neighborhood in the form of low-density, single-family houses that will blend in with our rural community, not appealing to high income or low income or medium income, whatever. The median income, by the way, in 2020 for Stayton was $63,995, so that's pretty decent home you can get with that kind of salary. Perhaps when you consider this issue, maybe each of you should imagine this development being put in next to your house, next to where you've lived for years, and see if you still want to have this type of building go on in there, or if you would like to see some nice single-family homes and a nice housing development go in there. I appreciate your listening. If you want to see signatures of people that I spoke with, I have those available to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. I don't know. Do we have any other opponent testimony? That's just in the line here. If there isn't any, let's go to government agencies. Dan? Where'd he go? There he is. And probably where it would fit under general testimony, that probably was where your testimony fits in there, Jan, but wherever, it's fine. Questions from the public? Anything? More questions from the council? Yes, Brian?
Dan, Marion County Public Works, in their letter to you, asked that the city take over the maintenance of this section of Fern Ridge Road from North 10th Avenue eastward following completion of those improvements. Does that mean it terminates at 22 from that point? So from 10th all the way down to 22? And if so, what's the cost of that? What does that entail?
I would interpret that what the county is asking for is for the city to take over maintenance of Fern Ridge Road completely within the city limits, which goes to Highway 22.
Okay.
I can't begin to estimate what those costs would be. As I said earlier, the city currently maintains Fern Ridge Road from Cascade Highway to the east boundary of Sylvan Springs subdivision, the west side of the church. We just be part of our ongoing street maintenance. We'd have that much further to do.
Okay. Thanks.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, go ahead, Counselor.
Dan, we're already doing, is it adding on like this much to this much already? I know, that's not very
Yeah,
approximate,
well, you know.
We're already
Yes, we
maintaining
already maintain, I think it's roughly 900 feet from Cascade Highway to the, I can't show you, from Cascade Highway to the east side of Sylvan Springs subdivision, which butts up against Foothills Church.
Okay, so
So what the county is saying is when this property develops and the street is improved, they would be looking for the city to take over maintenance for the rest of Fern Ridge Road extending to the east.
Other thoughts? More questions? from
Yeah,
the
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
I actually have a question for Chief Friesendahl, if he'd be willing to come up for a minute.
Oh, there he is. All right.
Sorry.
Didn't mean to surprise you, but.
Yeah, they're okay. What can I answer for you?
So, in the previous meetings, I think the last one, which I don't think you were present, there were a couple concerns voiced from the public about the potential for, additional crime in the area with this many units going in. With the last proposal was 200 and something units, so it was a little more of a concern. But what my question to you basically was that in your experience or in any data that you have, are there any differences in crime rate or added crime incidents depending on the type of housing that's in a particular area?
It can, and I think the very basics of it is more people in a smaller area, you're going to have higher crime because you have more people interacting with each other. So if you just look simply at an apartment complex versus a residential neighborhood, you're probably going to have a higher crime rate depending on that. There's a lot of other variables that go in that, rental costs, what they are, the area we're in, education. I mean, you can go on and on and on, but usually more people in an area, more dense area, is a higher, you're going to have more calls for service. Not even crime rate, just calls for service.
Sure.
Everything that we take care of with the police department. My understanding from that comment, I'm sorry I wasn't here, I was healing from spinal surgery. So I was a little,
Fair enough.
occupied at that point in time. We're still a full-service police department. We still take all calls. Now, are there times where people are delayed for the call that we're responding to because of lack of staffing, because we're just busy? It's a really busy day. Yeah, that happens. But we still take all the calls for service. I did a little bit of research actually for this area, thinking that might come up tonight, so I brought some paperwork with me. So we took all the numbers for 2021, the beginning of the year, to about mid-December when we grabbed this, from Cascade East along Fern Ridge and out to 22, so all the homes basically in that area. This year we had 448 actions. I say actions because actions could be anything from a traffic stop, welfare check, to actually somebody reporting a fraud or a theft or various other things. So it covers a huge gamut. So that's 448 actions in general. I mean, we could miss something. Data sometimes can have a little bit of issues. And that's not surprising. It's not shocking. Of those, we had 63 of those 448 incidents or actions. 63 of them are potential crime issues. 63 of all those. The rest of them are everything from 70-plus traffic stops in that general area by law enforcement to welfare checks. We did area checks, something that I've asked my officers to do throughout the pandemic, throughout everything we've had, is to increase documenting their area checks, where they're at, what they're doing, and that, so I can actually go back in data and look at it. During that time frame, they did 66 area checks. So they're actually logging out and saying, hey, I'm doing this. That's foot patrols. That's all types of different things. We had 11 vandalism calls in that area. So it's nothing that's, shocking when I pulled that up. I'm actually pretty pleased with it. So if that helps a little bit with the questions, if you got more, I'll gladly keep going.
Yeah, one other thing is, so Dan had mentioned all the kind of planned developments in the near future. And you may have already spoken to him about this, but I wanted to know, for our information, if you anticipating needing additional officers or any staff added due to these new housing units going in?
Yeah, I would say we are at that point where we need to. Right now, as you know, we have 13 FTEs per the budget. One of those has been paying back for PERS. We're hoping to bring that 13th person back. As we grow, as our community grows, law enforcement is going to need to grow with that to be responsive, to keep a 24-hour level of service to the community. And with a larger population, we're going to have more incidents and more things happening. Having more officers on is going to help us, because a lot of times we're asking for outside agencies for assistance, like on graveyard, that kind of stuff. So yes, I'm already looking at that. Like, how can we start calculating, bringing that on? That's looking at through our dispatch response times. Are we starting to get too far out? What those priorities are, like priority one calls, and that's something we really want to look at. Those happening now. life safety issues that we need to look at as a police department, is if all of a sudden people have to wait 15 minutes because somebody's knocking on the back door that's not supposed to be there, that's a problem I need to address. Why are we having that problem? Is it an anomaly, or is it all of a sudden we're starting to have that happen more frequently? Is that, okay, we need to adjust our staffing to the police department, our schedules, all the different things that need to go into that. I'm not seeing that right now, but with the numerous apartment complexes that it look like are coming on board, as well as different complexes, yeah, we're going to need to add FTEs, and that's always a battle, I think, for every community, every city is, we are very expensive. We are that huge cost to any community, and that's definitely something that's a struggle, because sometimes we have to give things up to do other things. The other part is then what level of service are we able to provide, given those calls for service? So we aren't maybe doing some of the lower priority or code enforcement, things like that, where we're actually more focusing on crime prevention, trying to be as proactive as we can, stopping those crimes, stopping those bad folks from doing things before they do it. A lot of times that's us being able to be out in the field, not be on calls, and actually let them see us and get out of our cars and talk to people and sort of let them know that presence. So it is something I'm looking at. It's something that I always have a thought process on.
Sure.
And would move forward.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
You bet. Okay.
Okay. Any more questions from the council? Applicant summary. Mark? Mr. Grants?
Thank you. These masks that loop around my ears with my hearing aids, every time I take them off, it pulls my hearing aid off. So I usually wear the ones that go around my head. Thank you very much. So I apologize for the notation on our drawing. Each of the different styles of units that we have a letter designation to them, and then I didn't have the guys delete that. It's just if you look at some of our projects, there's a G unit, there's an H unit, but they don't mean anything other than just like Dan said, an architectural style. So I apologize for that. I do want to note that I think that what Jan said might be slightly incorrect. That there were, throughout the process of the different hearings, there were quite a few people that were supportive of medium density, just didn't want multifamily. So I don't think that to say that nobody was supportive, I think that's incorrect. Now, you guys get to decide that, but I think that's right. I do remember one of the questions that the mayor had put forth and wanted to know why, if there was logic to why I clustered the attached units in the center versus the perimeter, and there was real logic to that, in that I was trying to put this more conventional single-family detached units around the perimeter up against the manufactured home park, and in areas where they would be out towards where other properties would be affected by it and clustered. So that was one of the reasons, and the other was, like I explained to you earlier, about being able to get that street to cut through there and to make that work. So anyway, there was some logic for why I did that. I really believe that we've come up with a plan that addresses all the things that I've listened to over the course of multiple meetings with council. Some of you weren't in the start, but you're here at the end just to go through this, and I appreciate your patience with us. And as you can see from this process, it's kind of, I'll call it fetch a rock, but anyway, it's a process. We're trying to figure out what everybody wants it to be, and there's lots of different options when you're doing this type of a project. I would tell you that if I had started this and had gone through the process of putting together a full-blown set of development plans to go through this, I never would have been here. I wouldn't have gotten to this place without going through and spending a huge amount of resources in order to try to get there. So I firmly believe that this is the right process. I think it gets us to the point where the council can have the input, the community can have some input, and so that the resources that we spend in order to develop all of the other things that would have to go with an application, which is thousands of dollars worth of resources, are done in a way that's moving in the direction that everybody wants it to be, and not something that's just based on what I or my client might envision it needs to be. Sometimes it's not that difficult if you have a piece of property that's zoned, and the zoning is obviously going to be low density, then you know where you're going to go. And if it was high density, you know where you're going to go. But this piece of property kind of fell in that spot where I don't think that I could have ever guessed exactly how it was going to go. But I think that we got to a point where our client realized what everybody was hoping to achieve here, and I think we've done that. So it's a little bit more dense than what you would have in low density, but I don't think that it's so much that it's going to be a big traffic burden, with Fern Ridge being a major street in town, and it's being designed to handle that traffic. So I don't think that a TIA is going to show that there's a lot of negative impacts, but that's the purpose of going through the process with the TIAs, to identify those traffic impacts that this project would have on key intersections in town, and those get evaluated, and if there's mitigation that needs to be provided as the result of this project, and that's what that does. And so the goal with that is to make sure that development provides those facilities and mitigates the impacts that it creates. It's not intended to just keep layering on and until something doesn't work. So I don't think that's going to be that hasn't proved to be the case in most of the recent projects we've been doing. The traffic studies have been very thorough, and the traffic consultants do a good job of working with communities and with your public works staff in order to make sure that, and when Marion County would be a part of that, and they're pretty thorough too. So I don't think that's going to be an issue. So I just ask that the council continue to move forward with the annexation of this as medium density. I think it is a good compromise for your community in terms of making sure that you're maximizing the amount of density that you can have in town, and that you're allowing for a little bit more variety of housing types than just standard single-family homes, which is the majority of what this town has had. So I know that in Jerry's stuff, he pointed out that he felt that duplexes and triplexes haven't turned out very well in the community, but I don't think that you have very much of that that's very new. I think it's pretty much older, and I think you could say that about a lot of the older part of town, is that it just hasn't always gotten the care that it should have. The homeowners, since the majority of these are going to be owner occupied, and I would venture to say that even some of the duplex or triplex might likely end up being owner occupied, at least one unit of it, and the other to be type of a rental element. But I don't see that today. We do an awful lot of multifamily development around the valley today, and the units are nice, they're finished well, and they're well maintained. I just don't think that's going to be a problem in this day and age, which wasn't the case when a lot of this stuff was being developed by Philippi and other people in town years ago. That just wasn't the way it was looked at. And I was familiar with Mr. Philippi. That was my very early years when I worked for another consultant then, but I date myself pretty well with that. But with that, I'd be happy to answer any other questions you might have of me if this is the time for that now. So,
Questions for Mr. Grantz? Anything? If not,
thank you very
Mark.
much for your time.
Okay, thank you. Staff summary, yeah?
I'll try to be brief. I think that the application you now have before you with the December 23rd conceptual plan reflects to a great extent what staff was hoping would happen to this property. And I think to a great extent reflects the concerns raised at the previous public hearings about the previous conceptual plans that were submitted. if the council has concerns about memorializing this conceptual plan, as we talked about earlier, I would suggest that the appropriate motion before you is to approve the application, to approve the first consideration of ordinance 1043 with modifications, and that the modification that's needed is to add a fifth exhibit, an Exhibit E, to include the conceptual plan, and that would be it. Otherwise, the staff recommendation is to approve this application, finalize this process, and move forward.
Okay. Thank you, Dan. All right, with that, I'm going to close the hearing and go to council deliberation. So questions, thoughts,
Mr. Mayor?
concerns? Go ahead.
I am just really impressed with what came back this time for a conceptual plan. And I feel like a lot of the concerns about the different criteria that have to be met, even the ones that, let's see, where are those criteria? Anyway, it feels like it fits a lot more with what the neighborhoods around look like. I think that we're in an age now where completely low density is probably not going to be as common because of how much of a demand there is for housing. And so that we can come to a point where we have 68% of this still single-family detached. And there was a lot of thought, you can tell, put into that conceptual plan. I think that voices were heard because we had a plan in front of us with over 300 units at one point. And now we're down to, 108 or something like that overall for dwelling units. I think that the people that came forward, they were heard, the developer listened, and although it was a long process, I'm really proud of the process and where we ended up. I think that the need is now there when you look at the difference in percentages, where we're at 68%, because I'm looking at how many houses are vacant right now, and the one that has 21 vacant, I don't believe they can even build right now. There's a stop on it in Phillip Estates Phase 2, I think. So we really do have a need for a single-family detached. And I feel like we're at a point where it meets the annexation criteria.
Okay. Anyone else?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, go ahead, please.
I agree with Councilor Hook, and this is last meeting when I said that I was looking for more of a compromise, and this is more of what I envisioned with the housing. This meets that, so I am also happy that the applicant took what people said into consideration and came back with this. This is more along the lines of what I was looking for, so thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Are we,
Yeah, one thing, sorry.
go ahead.
I tend to agree with Councilor Hook and Councilor Ord as well. I wanted to bring up, since there was, Councilor Quigley brought up growth rates and those other concerns, there's also House Bill 2001, I believe, from 2019, which implemented zoning restrictions on cities over population of 10,000. The growth rate stated by Dan, I don't think we're going to hit 10,000 people for 20 years. And so those restrictions on single-family zoning aren't going to be a concern for quite a while. They will exist, most likely. Basically, what that says is that we can't restrict low-density housing to only single-family homes. We have to allow duplexes and triplexes on any lot, pretty much. But like I said, that's 20 years down the road at our current growth rate. With that said, I think the number of units and the density we're talking about here fits our needs, especially considering the other properties that are planned for development on Golf Club Road, especially those buildings over there. So I would be in support of this motion with the modification of the addendum for this plan to be added as an appendix.
All right. Thank you, Ben. Anyone else?
Yeah, real quick, Mr. Mayor, this is Councilor Paddock.
Go ahead.
I just want to compliment this community on this process of speaking out as to what we wanted to see, and the applicant also hearing that and putting that in writing here. I think that this has been a very exhaustive process, but I am appreciative of it and the end product that it has resulted in. And for me, with the modification, I feel comfortable voting for that tonight. So thank you for everything. Appreciate it.
Okay. All right, are we ready to go to a council decision on this? And if so, would someone like to roll the ball, as they say?
Sure, Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead.
I am going to move to approve the application for annexation, assign a medium density zoning, and approve the first consideration of ordinance 1043 with the modification of adding the latest proposed plan as Exhibit E to be filed with the ordinance.
I'll second.
And there's a motion and a second to approve the application for annexation, assigning MD zoning, and approve the consideration of ordinance 1043 with modifications, the modification being, is there a list of them already? Or is this just this one that's memorializing the conceptual plan?
The motion was to add the conceptual plan.
Right.
As a fifth exhibit.
Okay, the fifth exhibit, fifth or sixth, okay, whatever, yeah, all right, there's more then. Okay. Yeah. A motion and a second, is there any other discussion? Going once,
Mr. Mayor,
going,
I just really want to say that I want to thank each of my council members for allowing me to ask all the questions that I wanted to ask and bearing with me on the many drill downs that I did. And thank you to the city staff as well for coming back with all the information and for all of the community that came forward and really did make an impact. And so I'm excited to support this motion.
okay, thank you. Anything else then? If nothing else, Alyssa, would you poll the council, please?
Sure. Counselor Ort?
Yes.
Counselor Quigley?
Yes.
Counselor Hook?
Yes.
Counselor Patty?
Yes.
Counselor McDonald?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Okay. Okay, let's see, I finished, Alyssa? I have to read this, right? Okay. The council's action may be appealed within 21 days of the mailing of the notice of decision to the Land Use Board of Appeals under ORS 197.805-855. Okay, we've got that one. One more piece of business, and kind of interesting. Ordinance number 1052, which is amending the land use code standards for accessory dwelling units. And I have to read some more, so again. Good evening. My name is still Henry Porter. As mayor, I'll be presiding over this hearing. This is the time and place set for a public hearing in the matter of land use file number 12-10/21 concerning legislative amendments to the Land Use Development Code to allow accessory dwelling units in the high-density residential zone and to bring the code into compliance with state law requiring standards for accessory dwelling units. The hearing is now open. At the back is a copy of the proposed amendments, the agenda for this evening's meetings, which lay out the order in which people will be called on to speak during the public hearing, the city's rules of procedure for land use public hearings, and a brochure written to facilitate your participation in the public hearing. You are encouraged to obtain and read a copy of these documents as well. At this time, I would ask the audience if there are any objections to the notice of this hearing. I hear none. To the jurisdiction of this body to hear and consider this case. I hear none. Are there any declarations of conflict of interest, ex parte contact, or bias by any members of this body? I hear none. When it's your turn to speak, please state your name and address for the record. As a participant in the hearing, the city is required to notify you of the final results of the process. We're now ready for the staff report. Dan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, and Mr. Lewis. And anyone watching out in the virtual world. The issue before you tonight is a public hearing on an amendment to the land use code that addresses two different issues associated with our regulation of accessory dwelling units. The city council enacted amendments to the land use code in 2017 to permit accessory dwelling units on any lot with a single-family detached dwelling in the low-density zone and the medium-density zone. A couple of months ago, I got an email from someone wanting to know whether they could put a tiny house in her mother's backyard and her mother's property. Her mother owns a single-family detached house that just happens to be zoned high-density residential. And so my answer was, gee, I'm sorry, no. But I don't have a good reason why other than the code doesn't allow it. And I think that when we were writing the code 5 years ago, we just assumed high-density residential's multifamily. There's not going to be single-family homes there. But there are 6 or 7 single-family detached homes that happen to be zoned high-density residential. And so this code amendment that's presented to you would allow those 6 or 7 people to have an accessory dwelling unit, just like every other single-family detached house in the city. In addition to that, 2 years ago, the legislature enacted a law that requires that we allow accessory dwelling units on lots with single-family homes, subject to reasonable local regulations about siting and design. And the legislature amended that law to say that reasonable local regulations relating to siting and design may not include a requirement for owner occupancy and may not include a requirement for an additional parking space, both of which were included in our regulations when we enacted them in 2017. So this amendment that is before you would repeal those two provisions from the code that the legislature has said that we may not have in our code. So the Planning Commission, once I brought this issue to them, initiated this action. They held their public hearing in November and had unanimously recommended to the council that you enact these amendments. With that, I'll answer any questions you may have.
Dan, the tiny home on 3rd Avenue, the north end of 3rd Avenue, not up the hill toward the cemetery, but down at the bottom of the hill, that's a high-density zone?
No, it's either low density or medium density. It's medium density. So that was permitted.
Oh.
That's in like the 1300 block, I forget the address. That
That's the first one in town.
that actually is the second in town. The first was a home, I forget whether it was on Brody or, what's the other street there? Cooper. It was the last house to be built in that subdivision. It was right after we had enacted the amendments allowing it. And when the building inspector went to do final inspection, we got a call from Marion County Building Inspection saying, they've put an apartment in this house. Were you aware of that? And I said, no, but we just passed a code to allow it. So that was the first. The second was the tiny home. It's not really a tiny home. It's a little bigger than what I think of as a tiny home. But anyway, the little detached ADU on 3rd Ave. And the third one is, as I mentioned at the December hearing, there's an ADU under construction right now on, I think it's Meadowlark, but someplace in Sylvan, on the east side of Sylvan Springs, someone's building an attached ADU onto their home. Those are the only three that have, at least I'll say, the only three that have come in and gotten permits.
Is there one, Dan, I think there's one on Marion between 4th and 5th. No biggie. I mean, apparently this all fits into.
If it is, it's either been there for a long time or they didn't get a permit. So there's, we've had these rules allowing ADUs in place for a bit over 4 years. We've seen 3 of them built.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Dan, can you, I'm right here. So this letter that we got from the Fair Housing Council of Oregon, can you I read it 3 times.
Good.
So I just don't understand what they're getting at.
What they're getting at is they believe that we should have some more robust findings about state land use goal 10, which is housing. And what they probably think that our comprehensive plan and housing needs analysis should be saying. But our comprehensive plan and housing needs analysis doesn't really say a whole lot. And so they're not expressing opposition to the amendment, but they're thinking that we should have more detailed findings supporting this change. They sent me, as an example, what the city of Albany's findings were when they were enacting some amendments to their ADU standards. And it went on for pages and pages because Albany's got a very detailed housing needs analysis that talks about the exact types and styles and needs and actually talks about accessory dwelling units as part of their meeting their need for additional housing. Our comprehensive plan, our housing needs analysis was written at a time before we allowed accessory dwelling units, so they're not even mentioned in our comprehensive plan at all. When I first heard from the organization, I actually did add some stuff into the findings in the ordinance, and then when they saw what I did, they just thought that it should be more wordy.
Well, but why? What?
Because
Influence.
because their job in life, their role in life is to make sure that cities are thinking about housing.
But we are thinking about housing, and that's why
I agree with you.
before us, right?
Yes, and we're doing what should be done to increase the opportunity for additional housing in town by doing this.
I guess that's where I was confused, is
I-
I don't see, they want to, they agree with this, but they think that we should talk more about it.
Right.
In agreeance with it.
Right, right. I mean, it reminds me of conversations I have with my dear wife,
Mr.
who
Mayor?
just wants to, asks me to do something and I say yes, and then she goes on to explain why she wants me to do it, as if she's trying to convince me I should be saying yes,
Okay.
when I've already said yes.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I have a question for Dan. Would you consider that this is possibly a lobbying attempt to get us to consider more changes, and this is an opportunity for them to do so, and so they have created a comment on what we're doing and not opposing it, but then also saying, yes, and do more?
Perhaps,
Yeah.
perhaps.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
It's not the first time that they've submitted a letter to us. I think my recollection was when I saw it, it came up when we talked about the ADUs last time. So-
Yes, and they submitted some written comments when we were considering the annexation and comprehensive plan amendment for the property up on Gulf Lane, because we were removing residential property and turning it into commercial property. So we all have our roles in life, and this is their role.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I wasn't missing something, so thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Anything else?
Yep, one thing.
Dan, go ahead.
Dan, and then you may have to excuse my ignorance on this, but is there a reason, is the statement here is that there's 7 single-family dwellings on an individual lot in the high-density zone. Like, first thing I thought of was, well, why don't we change the zone to a medium or whatever would conform to those structures that are there? Is there a reason we don't go that direction, or is that just the way things work?
I guess the honest answer to that is this is the easiest path. This is a pretty minor tweak to the code. Then going through the process of changing the zoning map for these little, almost all of these lots with a single-family home that are zoned high density are adjacent to apartment buildings. So I would just make up that back 45 years ago, when someone was drawing the map, they drew nice rectangles and included these lots with their neighboring apartment complexes.
Okay.
At the risk of sounding facetious, which I'm not, we'd get an even nastier letter from the housing folks if we were to be removing high-density property and turning it into medium density.
Is there any risk of an unintended consequence of the owner of an actual apartment complex wanting to plop down tiny homes in their backyard?
No, because the code is clear that an ADU is allowed on a lot with a single-family home.
Okay, good, thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
do we have any design standards for ADUs?
No,
So-
we have siting standards in that they need to meet setbacks, and they have to meet the same setback and height restrictions that are for other accessory structures.
Sure. So theoretically, could you put a shipping container on your property as an ADU?
You, theoretically, if you could show that it met the structural code, then yes,
Probably something we should look at.
yes. But theoretically, you could put a if you had 1,000 square foot shipping container, you could put it on a vacant lot as a single-family home.
Sure.
because we don't, well, maybe not, as long as you meet those architectural design standards for a single-family home.
I don't know if we want to start with shipping containers,
I'm just
Dan,
thinking
but,
of Alaska.
yeah.
Bush-
Barge traffic.
We have size restrictions though, don't we?
We have size, right, we have a minimum and a maximum size,
That's what I was
200, minimum of 250 and maximum of 800.
What's a 40-foot shipping container?
I assume,
What are they, 12 by 40?
12 by
I was just
40.
asking the question.
Right. Now look what you did.
Well, I'm going to create a panic here. Let's
No,
not.
I don't.
Dan, do you want to go ahead with an applicant presentation?
There is no applicant,
Unless we've got more questions.
there is no applicant.
Okay. And you've kind of given a staff report?
That was my staff report.
Okay. Questions from the council? More of them? Proponents' testimony? Are there any proponents? How about opponents? Anyone? Any government agencies that, other than, I don't know if it's a government agency that's.
No, they're not a government agency.
Oh, Fair Housing Council of Oregon. I guess that's a government agency.
No,
Maybe a private agency, I don't know. Any general testimony? Questions from the public? More questions from the council? Is there a summary, Dan?
I don't have anything to add, other than to say it's both the staff recommendation and the recommendation from the planning commission to enact these amendments.
Okay. Well, I'm going to go ahead then, and there's no objection, close the hearing and go to council deliberation. And we'll see what you folks want to do with this.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, council?
whenever anyone is ready, I'm ready to make a motion on this.
Go ahead.
Okay. I'd like to move to approve ordinance number 1052 as presented.
Okay.
I'll second that, Mr. Mayor.
Well, hearing's already been closed, so a motion and a second to approve that number one, approve the first consideration, or just as presented? A motion to approve ordinance number 1052 as presented. Did I hear that right? Okay, and a second. Any more discussion?
I'm pretty sure that
I'm sorry.
the first consideration is always a given, right? Yeah, because it's the process that we have to go through.
If it's not unanimous, then it comes back.
Yeah.
Okay, so, ready to, Alyssa? Would you poll the council, please, on ordinance
Sure.
1052?
Yeah. Counselor Hook,
Yes.
Counselor McDonald,
Yes.
Counselor Quigley,
Yes.
Counselor Ort,
Yes.
Counselor Patty.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
0, so, okay. And that could be presented to myself for a signature. Okay. Sorry? I have to read one more thing, real quick. The city council's decision may be appealed to the land use board of directors within 21 days in accordance with ordinance number 197.830. Okay, under general business, anyone have anything this evening?
We didn't
A lot
have
of
any.
good work, a 2.5-year process to get that annexation, which is impressive.
I have one question for Alyssa and/or staff.
Sure.
So this is regarding COVID. Seeing a big spike in cases and things. Do we have any measure or anything we're considering at which point we may go back to remote meetings?
It's not something that we've discussed at this point. We are in the office. We are definitely taking measures to separate people, have as few in the office as we can in our general areas, but for meetings, we haven't discussed it. It's something the council is wishing to discuss. We definitely would be open.
Melissa, we're allowed to be meeting from home if we want to. We just have to let you know, right?
Absolutely. Part of the current council rules is that members of the council can meet from home, and also there's the option, as you know, we're live streaming right now, virtual public comment and public hearing testimony options as well. So yes, definitely, if there's a wish of a council member or staff, our staff is on, the ones that aren't here, are stream, on the Zoom.
The previous state guidelines for public meetings kind of came down from the state, though, right? That's what we were adhering to. So
Yeah,
anything that would force us back into that would likely come from the state.
probably.
Okay.
Yes, and council wishes as well, yeah, just depending what would come down and happen.
Okay.
And if we're on the communications from city staff, I did have one item that I just wanted to talk about tonight. I know the council's probably aware about this, but I also wanted to put it out there that on January 13th, next Thursday, we're going to be holding a community input meeting for the city manager position. Jensen Strategies will be hosting that. It's not a council meeting. It'll be hosted by Jensen Strategies. Staff will be on hand. It'll be virtual. They will be appearing virtual. And we wanted to have the option for community members if they preferred to come in person. So there will be a couple of us here to facilitate that with Jensen. But anybody wishing to participate virtually, they should reach out to us. They can send an email. It's the same email that's on our agendas. It's citygovernment@StaytonOregon.gov. And that's next Thursday at 6 o'clock. The in-person will be here at the community center. That is it for me.
It seems like it's, to me, it comes down to always what we want to do. A bunch of us picked up on that that is an important thing. So that's it for me for tonight. Anyone else have anything?
Mr. Mayor, this is Councilor Patty.
Yes.
I just had a quick note I wanted to make. Earlier, we heard from our Chief of Police, Friesendahl, about kind of what the status of the police department is and how they're still answering the call for service that we're asking of them. I had the privilege to actually review the staff report from November of last year and meet with Dave about that. And very appreciative of your time. And I just want to compliment the work that your police force is doing in continuing to answer these calls for service. And these huge numbers of calls for service that we have in a city like Stayton. And then when you compare this to other jurisdictions with bigger populations and fewer calls of service, it's just really remarkable what our police force is doing right now. And I want to make sure that we get them all the help that we can get later on down the road when it comes time to open up that new FTE. So I just wanted to go ahead and voice that right here. So thank you, Dave, for your continued work, and thank you to your officers. That shows.
Anything else?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I just wanted to welcome Councilor quickly back to the
Indeed.
council and excited to serve with all of you for another year.
Mr. Mayor,
Well said.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I also wanted to thank Councilor Patty, or President Patty, for taking on that role. Thank you for doing that. And thank you, Councilor Ort, for your service this last year.
I echo that, and thank you for your support, all of you. I really appreciate it.
Suppose anyone's going to thank us, Ben, for anything?
Thanks, guys. I said thanks for being here.
I don't do it for the thanks. All right, are we done for this evening? If we are, let's go home. Thank you, folks, and we'll do this again.